I've been part of large organizations where literally there were walls between development teams and operations teams that you build something in a silo, you push it over the wall to an operations team, and then they take all the documentation to push things, right? That's a very slow, painstaking process. And you look at like, product companies or tech companies or like, teams that want to move fast in a growth environment. You want to be able to identify ways to ship things more seamlessly without having to depend on teams, make things more autonomous, making teams self-reliant so that you could ship things more faster and you can stay more competitive and deliver more with less.
This podcast is hosted by Cortex.io. We help organizations continuously improve their operational maturity and reduce developer friction so that the whole organization operates as one. Check out the link in the description to see how we've helped our customers cut their MTTR in half, double their deploy frequency, and save thousands of engineering hours with golden paths and the right guardrails. Thanks for listening to Brain Trust, a podcast for engineering leaders by engineering leaders. Hey everyone, welcome to the Brain Trust by Cortex podcast, podcast meant for engineering leadership and learning the nitty-gritty lessons of running an engineering org from those who have actually done it themselves. Today with me, I have Dinesh, who I've had the pleasure of working with in the past. He runs SRE, security, infra, and has done a lot in his past. So Dinesh, very excited to have you on. If you don't mind introducing yourself real quick.
Absolutely. Hey, thanks for inviting me, Ganesh. Yeah, my name is Dinesh Sukhija. I'm currently a director of engineering for some security teams at Okta, using my SRE, data engineering, and security skills and teams to deliver security outcomes in the cyber defense organization and enterprise security tooling teams. But as you said, we had a pleasure to work together in the past. Before Okta was at Open Door, leading infrastructure and DevX teams. We were early adopters for Cortex, know a thing or two about how to run a DevX organization, how to fail, and how to learn from those failures, adopt a culture of reliability using some tools like Cortex and others. Happy to dive into that. And yeah, excited to be here.
Very excited to have you on. Obviously what's top of mind today for everyone is, AI is changing everything. As I'm sure you know, working in cyber defense, we've saw the recent issues with TANstack and the NPM ecosystem and all this stuff. And so I want to talk about that, but I want to maybe zoom back 5 years ago, pre-AI, and talk about platforms as they were initially designed, and then kind of talk about the evolution of those today. And so, like you mentioned, you have had the experience of building platform SRE infrastructure security teams from scratch in organizations that didn't have a very mature team for those kinds of things. And so I want to zoom back and talk about, before AI agents, when you started building out a platform, when you started building out developer experience, kind of what were your core goals? Like, what were you working towards? Why were you brought in to build these organizations? What was the point of all that?
Yeah, I think the whole transition has moved from building teams to pivot away from operations to platform. And that's effectively been the major theme for DevX and platform teams emergence. Like, we're seeing the term DevOps being dropped quite a bit, and we're hearing SRE teams are effectively platform teams and DevX teams. What effectively they're doing is taking the toil away from infrastructure engineers and building paved paths and platforms and abstraction capabilities for product engineers and other engineers to just deliver things without having to depend a lot on infrastructure teams and driving value there. So I think that's really been the major driving ethos or practice that's given the rise to a lot of the IDPs and DevX as a practice in general. If you just hit DevX and Google Trends, you'll see like in the last 3 years that term's really spiked, and that's kind of correlates with how teams are operating now. Like most modern teams now have less operations focused infrastructure teams and more platform focused teams where you do a lot of self-service enablement, paved paths, you create capabilities to discover things more easily and take the complexity away from product teams so that they can focus on their core capabilities, and you leverage tooling and capabilities to deliver infrastructure or platform level capabilities.
Why is that? Like, why the shift away from ops and traditional infra teams to platform and self-service type things?
Yeah, I think productivity. I think that's the main driver, right? As teams are starting to ship more with less, and productivity becomes a big focus, and you start to look at which are the teams that are not are being blockers. Like I've been part of large organizations where there were walls between development teams and operations teams, that you build something in a silo, you push it over the wall to an operations team, and then they take all the documentation to push things, right? That's a very slow, painstaking process. And you look at like, product companies or tech companies, or like, teams that want to move fast in a growth environment. You want to be able to identify ways to ship things more seamlessly without having to depend on teams, make things more autonomous, making teams self-reliant, so that you could ship things more faster and you can stay more competitive and deliver more with less.
Is it safe to say the idea is around like removing bottlenecks and giving people autonomy? Like, is that the point? Like you talk about dependencies and productivity. Was that the primary thing you were trying to solve? Like it seems like developer experience is about like, let's give people a great experience for shipping stuff. But the way you're describing it sounds more like, hey, we actually want to elevate productivity and reduce bottlenecks. Is that kind of the underlying assumption?
Yeah, that is definitely the underlying assumption. And along the journey, we also realize, and this term is kind of overused, but I think it's really important, which is developer happiness. I think happier developers tend to deliver more. They tend to stay more focused. By removing these blockers, like minor annoyances that add up during the day, so much to the effect that the developer says, let's do this, I'm not going to work anymore, I'm going to take a break, or what have you. There have been studies that show that developers that don't have a good DevX platform tend to move away from those organizations as well. So it's really important to measure developer happiness as well. And that trend also picked up. And I think abstraction capabilities, IDPs, they kind of lead into that happiness factor as well, that developers can ship things more seamlessly and happily without having to be blocked by things. So I think that's an important side benefit.
That makes sense. I think what you're describing is maybe what I've seen to be the success case for platform teams in the past, where developer experience and developer happiness is a desired byproduct of the platform investments, but the core thing you're trying to solve is like, how do we unblock people from moving forward and not having to depend on other teams to do that. And like the second order effect of that is like, well, if you're not stuck and you're not blocked by things, not only does productivity go up, but happiness also goes up. But I think a lot of people kind of get stuck on one or the other. Like they focus entirely on just developer happiness and they lose sight of like the core business value driving parts of the platform. Yeah. As you were building out your platform teams, how did you think about making sure that you always stayed aligned to those business outcomes?
Yeah, it is really important to build something that will be used by somebody. So, and that's the product mindset. If you look at when product engineering teams build out their roadmap, they do experimentation, they do interviews. I think the similar tactics need to be followed by platform leaders, so as to define what we are going to be building on an IDP, because that's gonna define whether this is something that's somebody's vanity project or is this going to be effectively used by engineers. So my way is a lot of interviews, so speaking to engineers, speaking to leaders and managers, like on a day-to-day basis, sitting with their pairing with them and watching them, like what's really bothering or hitting them in the software development lifecycle, which are the key blockers, and validating those problems with across teams, and then defining, hey, this is something that we should be solving for. So being very intentional about what should be on your DevX roadmap. It could be a process improvement, it could be a technology improvement, and you need to be really lockstep with your product teams on what you want to ship. And you also want to think about usage, like how are the teams going to be using it. You want to make it very Amazon one-click like capabilities, right? So you don't want them to like, hey, look at this documentation. You don't want to make it fragmented. You don't want to build a half developer experience. You want to build something that's seamless, that engineers can just go onto the portal, or like one-click deployments and so on, so that can build a lot of adoption. So two things is making sure that you're building something that's going to deliver real outcomes, and then you build it in a way that's that you have like strong developer experience mindset. I want to quickly go back to your previous question, like as you were talking about key reasons why teams want to look at a developer experience or a platform mindset, is also business continuity. What I've seen is that over time, teams develop tribal knowledge, teams leave, we have a very complex distributed architecture right now. So over time, knowledge is lost. If we are not taking steps right now to build some sort of a framework that can capture this knowledge so that tribal knowledge can be aggregated somewhere so that you have good business continuity. So if teams can move on, they can still come to that one single source of truth to discover things, to still ship things and not be a person dependent process. So business continuity, productivity, developer happiness, I think these are key outcomes that we want to pursue.
That's a really interesting point. Yeah, I haven't heard a lot of platform leaders talk about the continuity piece of it, but it makes sense. I mean, the reason design patterns are a thing, like being able to go into a new code base and like generally understand how things are being done, like that's one of the reasons why design patterns are useful. And so why is that any different the lower you go in the stack? Like being able to go in and understand this is how things are provisioned, this is how the system is set up, and being able to consume those things without being dependent on the one infra guy who has all this knowledge around how things are done makes a lot of sense.
Discoveries have become a lot easier now. Of course, I think post the November 2025 AI agentic inflection point, it's become a lot easier to dig up, past graves and understand why we did some things. But I think till now, it was very important to like have some sort of a structure to make sure that, you capture tribal knowledge and make it less people dependent.
So yeah, let's talk about that. Like clearly software engineering has changed drastically, even in just the last six to 8 months. A lot of platform engineering in the past was focused on golden paths and self-service because, spinning up, an S3 bucket of some kind or spinning up a new repo with a bunch of boilerplate would on average take a long time and a lot of approvals in that process. Today, I can open up Cloud Code and say, give me a fully baked Spring Boot application with these 15 things, and it will do that in the next 15 minutes. Why invest in things like golden paths? Should you invest in golden paths today? Like, are they even still relevant, or does that go out the door entirely now with AI?
Yeah, I think the golden path and the paved path / guardrails will continue to exist. They're just changing. I feel so. Yeah, creating different paved paths. It's a different control plane right now. And there are different dimensions to this, right? Earlier, the dimensions for golden paths were at the code level. There still are, but we are now elevating them to a different dimension. It could be like a security guardrail for AI, or say token usage, or the models that we want to choose, which need to be the approved ones. So there are different types of golden paths for AI delivery code. And now being in the security domain for the last 1 year, I have a very different perspective. So I've been in platform infrastructure space I was there for about 8 years. In the last 1 year, it's my first foray into like a pure play security engineering leadership role. So I have a very different perspective of what a paved path should look like from a security perspective. So I think that's how the narrative is changing, is that, where the paved path used to be scaffolders, and like a single click deployment options on a portal. I think they're shifting more towards how do you guardrail AI shipped code and what the paved path looks like for that.
That makes sense. One of the things that I think about when it comes to golden paths, there was a big value proposition around standardization. Like if everyone does things the same way, then there's some intangible benefit that you get because it's easier to operate and whatnot. AI has definitely made some of that less relevant because you don't necessarily have to understand the code base in its entirety to go and build in it or operate it. Is there still value in the standardization aspect of like different projects doing things the same way?
100%. And there's standardization from a business continuity point of view, but even like during wartime situations. If you're going through an incident, you're an engineer looking at a service that you don't have exposure to, some level of standardization helps a lot. Like for example, and when one of my previous companies, we had standardizations around what observability should look like for a service, and even just the layout. So there is less cognitive effort dispensed that, hey, if I'm going to look for something, I know top left is going to look like this. I know like right pane is going to look like this. So it really adds up. Like, and if you're operating on a day-to-day basis, especially during incident times. So that's one. Also, it helps with predictions. Like as an engineering leader, if I have to predict a spend or a compute usage or my buying needs, I think some level of standardization helps with that as well. So yeah, I still think it matters a lot, and you can still enforce standardization even obviously in agentic development as well. Guardrailing your skills and your agentic capabilities and your AI gateways so that you still ship code. Yeah, you're shipping it through AI, but it's still very contextual to us. It's still following our standards. It still looks more cookie cutter, which has its own benefits.
That makes sense. And I think even from a standardization perspective, we think about traditionally think about humans. Like, yeah, when we look at a dashboard, it's like it's the same no matter which service I go to, or I'm going to get the key signals out of the box every time because those things are really important. It's not necessarily different for agents, right? The more consistent things are, the more you can fine tune your own skills internally to build on different systems. It's like, hey, if you're building your own incident management agent internally, latency metrics are always going to look a certain way. This is the cardinality. This is the properties that are being tracked. And so rather than the agent having to reason about this every single time for every single service, you can fine tune skills that are like, okay, now we can get straight to the problem versus trying to reason about the world. Like, is that an accurate way of thinking about standardization from agent?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And absolutely. And one thought was kicking in my head when you were saying that is that as you standardize, you also give your models an opportunity to limit the sprawl. That gives you an opportunity to maybe in the future you could deploy your own micro model for a specific thing. And that will obviously help you with cost metrics. I think one of the things that's top of mind for many eng leaders, not just platform leaders, is the cost of AI. I feel we are right now in a very discounted phase of adoption, and it's only a matter of time when token costs are going to increase. So organizations will need to find ways to self-host some micro models, and as you standardize, you limit your sprawl and your patterns through paved paths. I think that can also lead into some efficiencies in the future.
That's a real interesting point. Yeah, because maybe in a micro level, individual changes you're trying to make or an individual incident, the tokens don't add up, but in aggregate, those tokens add up. Like if at the beginning of every incident, if your agent is trying to figure out like, okay, which metrics do I need to look at? How do I get those metrics? Which system am I talking to? Maybe for that one incident, it's not a ton of tokens, but across 100 incidents, trying to do that every single time is quite a bit. But then being able to short circuit that and say like, this is exactly what you need to know. Now go and explore the world based off of that is like a much different proposition. And the same thing is true for code bases as well. The other thing that I think about is from a security standpoint or even from a cost standpoint, do you want agents producing Terraform files willy-nilly? Like, okay, I want an S3 bucket. Let me just, vibe code a Terraform file for a bucket that's just, grossly, it doesn't have the right security permissions, or I'm going to provision a cluster that is just grossly over-provisioned. My guess is we probably don't want that. And so those things are still constrained by like, here is the paved road for provisioning a cluster or a piece of infrastructure, because that's not a thing you want agents doing. Is that the right way of thinking about it? Or how do you think like what agents are allowed to do versus what things are deterministic, pre-baked parts of the process?
Yeah. So, I mean, at this point, the genie's out of the bottle. You can't stop teams using agentic development. And I think that's detrimental to your own growth as well. So the way we are approaching secure agentic development is to continue to focus on guardrails and paved paths to make sure that we are not accidentally shipping code that can be detrimental, or it could expose us in a security incident. So, but at the same time, we don't want to cause too many blockers. So we are approaching security guardrails in a more developer-friendly way. Like our focus continues to be that, hey, let's 10x our productivity both on the development side, but also on the security side. So it's not going to be helpful if your product teams have 10x their capabilities, but the security teams are still hinged on traditional processes to control this, right? So you meet AI with AI. How do you improve your product security capabilities? How do you increase your cyber defense capabilities, detection capabilities, and at the same time not slowing down product teams? I think it's a very interesting opportunity for security engineering teams to step up to this challenge.
We'd love to hear more about that, actually. Like, what's like the most exciting thing that you found recently, like applying AI to verify AI from a security standpoint? Because I mean, obviously it's top of mind for everyone today. We've seen the TAN stack issues and the Shai-Hulud type things, and the kinds of attack vectors are growing quicker than we can even imagine. So yeah, how are you thinking about that? What is something you've done recently that has really delivered a lot of value?
Yeah, I can't confirm on what we've done, but I'll tell you
Yeah.
what's cooking in the industry and potentially
Yeah.
in our organizations is on both front. Like, so obviously AI SRE is a big domain that's kicking in, but there's also AI SOC and agentic SOC, which is security operations center capabilities. So making sure that while threats are AI threat actors are leveraging AI to identify exploits quickly. The defense teams are also looking at tooling, both custom and off the shelf, to make sure that before a threat is even exploitable, identifying a threat model, writing capabilities and rules that can detect and respond to those rules in a more AI fashion, right? So think about you know agentic flows that can identify like a published that is watching for a published thread, quickly writing its own detections, deploying them, and then also creating some sort of SOAR and alert playbooks, right? So that's where I feel the whole SOC industry is moving. But even the AppSec and the SBOM and the SCA capabilities are looking at various AI infusions to make sure that teams that are leveraging, say, packages that might be easily exploited now, how do we kind of intercept them in our AppSec capabilities to make sure that they're not getting shipped, uh, in when the vulnerability is active, right? So those are some of the ways that we are looking at meeting AI with AI.
Is there a worry that if AI can introduce threat vectors on the development side, that kind of meeting AI with the same risks introduces new risk vectors on the like detection side? Like, I guess you said differently, are there like non-deterministic properties of applying AI to the detection side that is causing concern, or how do you think about that from a security landscape perspective?
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at you have to like rely on your existing set of detection capabilities from the tools that are happening. So as you look at, say, developer station workflows, looking at endpoint security capabilities, there is a new domain in the AI DR space, which is again looking at a developer's AI use cases and detecting any intent, malicious intent there at the development phase. So the detection and response space, traditionally has been like, hey, you collect a lot of logs, you write a bunch of rules based on threat actors, but then you're also now looking at deploying agents, and these are endpoint agents to do AI detection and response capabilities in the developer workstations as well. So the whole DSPM space is also kind of expanding. So that's data security posture management. That's extending now into what does it mean for AI as well? Like, are there agents that are using some of the data that they shouldn't be? Are we accidentally exposing any sensitive data to AI agents? So that's a capability that a lot of teams are looking at as well. And how do you bring in DSPM offerings that can give you an AI security posture management as well?
That makes sense. It sounds, I mean, security has always kind of had this mindset, which is there's stuff happening in the development lifecycle, and you kind of want to guardrail against that so that bad things don't happen on the other side. And like, the way we do that and the things that we're looking at are maybe changing. Other parts of the organization, platform and SRE have been more, I guess, enablers versus like guardrails on the system. And do you think that platform and SRE are kind of going the way of security, where it's like more of a safety net, where it's like not just about convenience and the experience anymore, but it's more like, hey, if you mess up, we're there to catch you type of a system, where security has always been a little bit about that?
Oh, yeah. I think there is definitely an aspect of secure coding if that's extended to platform teams now. For example, like when we talk about how do you guardrail, what's the right model for our organization? Potentially the answer to that is maybe develop an AI gateway and then use that gateway capabilities to enforce a lot of the things, right? Like model choice, cost controls, data security controls, and so on. So I definitely think platform teams are creating secure paved paths now as well, keeping security in mind for developers.
What about SRE? Like, one of the things that we've seen in the data is that the forward pressure of PR, like the amount of code we're producing is just straining systems so much. And historically, in the traditional SRE model, you see that like SRE is kind of like the quote unquote first line of defense. Obviously there's nuances to it, but when things start to degrade, SRE at the end of the day is accountable for like aggregate reliability of the systems. And like how do they keep up with this? Like, is there more like the way security is like, hey, these are just like non-negotiables, like we must follow these things, otherwise you cannot go to production. SRE has historically been more of like guidance and influence and like, hey, here are the things you should be doing so that you can improve reliability. Is SRE becoming more like security in the sense of like the only way to keep up with the amount of stuff we're producing is to be more of like a systemic back pressure of like you cannot do these things or like you must follow these practices? How is SRE evolving from your perspective?
Yeah, I think all these guardrails need to continue to shift left. We cannot just keep it on the SRE teams. So with the practices of obviously making sure that you have paved paths, like the traditional paved paths, you have AI paved paths, but you also continue to improve your shift left security tooling to make sure that when code is actually getting reviewed, it's up to snuff with your organization standards. And obviously, like AI code review capabilities are getting a lot more mature now, and you can build skills and context in your AI code review tools as well to make sure that it's taking care of SRE reliability capabilities and security capabilities. And obviously, you eventually have a lot of SRE engineers, the human in the loop that goes to play in the delivery lifecycle as well. But I'm actually quite bullish about the whole AI SRE product suite as well. I think it's really become important just because of the volume of code. And traditionally, the toil in the SRE teams have been a lot. I've managed many teams. I've never seen as much stress in SRE with SRE teams. They're always stressed. The happiness index is always the lowest with SRE teams. So I think AI SRE is a great opportunity for some of the teams to lower the toil and improve not just the security posture, but the reliability posture as well in a more autonomous way.
As these teams are becoming, I guess, even more critical than ever before, like everyone is a builder, anyone can ship stuff, like more code going into production. These teams are all becoming more of a safety net. Are there opportunities for these teams like security and platform and SRE to work together as a more cohesive unit than they have in the past to like provide that more holistic guardrail? Like, I think you've had a unique experience where you have managed more holistic groups that kind of touch on all these pieces, but you don't always see that in organizations. Like, is there an opportunity there for those teams to work more closely together?
I think that's a fascinating point. I think one good question would be like what an org of the future could look like, and the future is already here, right? And we are seeing this amalgamation of roles now, right? We saw with CTO, CPO roles. We are seeing a lot of CTPO roles now. We are seeing a lot of product engineers shipping code. We are seeing, like, I encourage my engineers to put on the product hat in the security space to build that. So I think we're seeing we'll continue to see a fusion of product and engineering, but also product engineering and security engineering. As complexity shifts upwards now, you're not just worried about your algorithms or your core code or the guts of the code, but you're worried about the ecosystem now. So I think there is a great opportunity for senior leadership to think about like, hey, maybe we need to reimagine our organization. Maybe we need to bring security SRE teams together. Maybe our hiring bar needs to raise for engineers that can think about reliability, but can also think about security and not just product security. Can they also think about SOC security and so on? So I don't know what the answer for that could be, but I definitely see that it could continue to infuse in some way as everybody's getting superpowers with AI.
It also seems like those teams need to work more closely together than they have in the past, where you were talking about this earlier, where you want more of the security practices shifted left. So more of it is embedded in the platform itself. And, if you're building out AI SRE capabilities, then the ability to be like pull data from the platform to reason about the world becomes more important. And so should those functions, especially in like small organizations, let's say like sub 500 person engineering teams, especially, should SRE and infra and platform and security be part of the same function with the same leader? Or is like, how do you see that part of the organization shifting in the coming year?
Yeah, I think especially for smaller organizations, their mandate is to move fast. I think it will be beneficial for security and product leadership to be under one leader, or at least platform and security to be under one leader. It's very important for the organization to have a good technical leadership, right? That can make the influence. I've seen organizations that are run by non-technical teams or just pure play product teams, they tend to suffer on the platform and security roadmap. So it's really important, especially now as everybody's shipping code. Sometimes they don't know what they're shipping, that they have strong culture and appreciation of, what could go wrong, and what the org structure should look like, so that product and security teams can appreciate each other's mandate and build something together, right? So, like organizations start off small, then they branch off, then you have different leadership, and then you tend to see some tension between them. But I think there's relevant questions being asked right now, like maybe it's time to bring the teams together under one leadership now.
We're almost up on time, and so I want to shift gears to maybe a final topic, a little bit about your own personal learnings and your advice for other engineering leaders. You've had a very interesting career compared to a lot of folks that I talk to, where you've done a little bit of the entire spectrum, from product engineering to infra to developer experience to platform to security. Like, you've done it all, and they're very different fields with their own, their own challenges. What do you like? What mindset has helped you be successful in this wide spectrum? What's the secret?
I've always believed in saying yes to hard things, and just believing in my own capability to grind it out, fail, learn, and being brutally honest about what I can deliver and what I can't. So I'm personally driven by, growth mindset and a lot of hustle within me, just tenacity that I've built with, that just allowed me to, like, hey, I've never done security, but I'll be interested in learning more about it. And every couple of years, I've learned something new. And so, one advice I give to everybody, my friends, my teams, is say yes to hard things. Like, do the hard things, because that's the only way you could grow, right? So don't have the courage to say that, yeah, I don't know this yet, but yeah, I'll continue, I'll figure this out, and then I'll do this. So that's what I believe in, and that's what's taken me through different types of roles and different domains.
I guess on that similar vein, if you were talking to another engineering leader who's about to start at a company that's all in on AI, 90% of their PRs are written by coding agents, but they're building out a security platform, SRE team for the first time. What advice would you give them to make sure that initiative succeeds and is not just relegated to the side?
Yeah, I definitely want them to look at what a paved path for a security team looks like. So what systemic guardrails do you want to build in your coding lifecycle or your delivery lifecycle to make sure that the codes that again ship is up to your, not just your product engineering or SRE standards, but also security standards, and also making sure that being mindful of what security theater was actual outcome, because you want to make sure that you build these guardrails that actually move the needle for your organization at that stage of your organization. And your security roadmap will continue to change as you mature in your own organization's journey. At some point, SRE will become very important. At some point, security very important. It's very important for the security leadership to pivot based on what the organization's journey is, and not just continue to stay stuck to their own view of what security should look like.
Is there anything you would recommend they do to make sure that their influence kind of works in shaping the culture? Like, if they're building security or platform or something like that for the first time, there's probably a mindset of like shipping features is the most important thing, but you're probably building this function because there's a real need for it. Is there anything that you would share to make sure that, like, hey, you can shift the mindset of the organization to care about these things and not just shipping features? Anything that you would share around that?
Yeah. I'm a strong believer of measurable outcomes. One thing that I recall is, this capability that Cortex, by the way, built, which was around scorecards. I think we built security scorecards. At one of my previous organizations, we built, scorecards for everything, and then we presented those, and that can really drive impact when you really start seeing data behind speak. So I definitely make sure that if you want to make an impact, make sure that you can bring measurable outcomes or measurable problems that can help the decisions move in your favor.
Makes a lot of sense. Dinesh, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast. A lot of interesting learnings in here for folks as they're thinking about the evolution of security and platform and SRE in this AI era. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you so much, Ganesh.